at CoCoon, and I would like to welcome everyone to come to join our CoCoon Entrepreneurial sharing series. So before I introduce Patrick, I'll just quickly, in case for some of you, this is the first time being at CoCoon, I'd like to let you guys know that we are one of the largest co-working spaces in Hong Kong. And we currently have a very diverse group of entrepreneurs in software, hardware, fashion, social media, marketing, and more. And if you are interested to join our community, you can find out from our community developers. Let me just quickly introduce you to our team. Candy, maybe you would like to wave. She's at the back. Candy. Hello. Wayne, who's also in the back. Ringo, who's with us at the video. And also Erica, sitting right next to the computer. So once again, welcome, and we are very delighted to have Patrick here tonight with us. For him to share with us his experiences in building this startup. So I've got some background info about Patrick I'd like to share with everyone before we begin. First of all, Patrick is a co-founder of alive.dead.com, an online community for artists and their fans with over 1,800 artists and over 640,000 registered users. Patrick is also the executive producer of The Heavenly Kings, directed by Daniel Wu, who got the Best New Director award at the 2007 Hong Kong Film Awards. And prior to alive.dead.com, Patrick also co-founded and served as the CEO of Rotten Tomatoes. I'm sure all of us know about Rotten Tomatoes and read the reviews on, say, iTunes and almost anywhere on the web. And in case you don't know, it's a leading entertainment website focused on movie reviews and news, and one of the top 800 most visited websites in the world, according to Alexa Google ratings. Patrick also co-founded and served as the CEO for Design Reactor, a leading internet marketing firm focused on entertainment industry. Design Reactor's portfolio of clients under Patrick's tenure include Disney, ABC, Warner Brothers, and Artisan Entertainment, among others. Patrick holds a BA in Computer Sciences from the Universityof California at Berkeley. So without further ado, let us give Patrick a very warm welcome.
I'm Patrick Lee, and as Theodore mentioned, I am the co-founder and the ex-CEO of Rotten Tomatoes. And today my talk is entitled A History of Rotten, the Rotten Tomatoes Story. So, introduction. I am an American Born Chinese, UC for short. I went to UC Berkeley where I majored in cognitive science, and I am a serial entrepreneur with an S. Co-founded 5 companies, 3 in the States, 1 in China, and 1 here in Hong Kong. So what is Rotten Tomatoes? Rotten Tomatoes is a site for movie reviews and news. The goal of Rotten Tomatoes is to save you time and money by not seeing bad movies. So the way it works is we go and we aggregate all the reviews for any given movie, good or bad, like so. And for each review, if the critic recommends seeing the movie, give it a fresh tomato, and if they don't recommend seeing the movie, we give it a rotten tomato. And the reason why it looks like this is the idea is if the movie is bad, you throw the rotten tomato at them, and it has a green splat. So we then take the percentage of fresh reviews out of the total number of reviews to get the tomato meter rating. So in this case, Men in Black 3 has a tomato meter rating of 69%. So if the movie has a tomato meter rating of 60% or above, it's considered fresh, and if it's below 60%, it's considered rotten. So that out of the way, let's start from the beginning. So before Rotten Tomatoes, I had a web design firm. I co-founded a web design firm with my friend Stephen Wang, who's sitting right over there. Yeah. And Stephen was the CTO of the design firm. He also went to UC Berkeley, where he majored in computer science. The design firm's name was Design Reactor, and we were focused around the entertainment industry. We did a lot of work for Disney Channel. We also worked with Warner Brothers Online, did the official Jet Li website, and did the official Flash game for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And during the peak of that show's popularity, we were actually the most played Flash game ever up to that point. Here's some shots of our team at our office in Universityof California. We had over 20 people at our design firm, mostly from UC Berkeley, and as you can see in these photos, mostly straight out of school. And this is the creator of Rotten Tomatoes, Sen Duong. He was actually serving as our creative director at Design Reactor when he came up with the idea. So how did he come up with the idea? Well, back in the day, movie studios would buy full-page newspaper ads to promote their movie. And they would look something like this. They look like a movie poster filled with quotes. And those quotes would be good quotes, regardless if the movie was good or bad. So if the movie was good, the quotes would be from like professional film critics. But if the movie was bad, they'd still find good quotes, but they'd be from random like TV stations and radio DJs and whatever in the middle of nowhere. So Sen's idea was, well, what if you went and you took all the quotes from professional critics, good and bad, and put them all in one place? And so Rotten Tomatoes was born. Sen launched the site in August 1998, and it looked like this. And the first movie he launched with was Rush Hour, because Sen is a huge Jackie Chan fan. And when the movie was coming out, he just wanted to go and find everything that was written about Rush Hour. So we eventually transitioned from Design Reactor over to Rotten Tomatoes. And actually at first, Steve and I were against Sen working on Rotten Tomatoes. And the reason why was it was affecting his work. He was pulling really late nights and oftentimes all-nighters where I would try and gather reviews on Wednesdays and Thursdays before the movies came out. And then, you know, as a result, he wasn't as productive at work. He came in late, called in sick, etc. But gradually, we came around. And three things in particular changed our minds. Number one, again, back in the day, Netscape and Yahoo had this cool site of the day, cool site of the week, cool site of the month, and Rotten Tomatoes was selected as cool sites. Yahoo also had a magazine called Yahoo Internet Life, and in one issue, not this one, but one of them, there was a very famous movie critic named Roger Ebert, who wrote an article where he picked out his favorite movie sites, and Rotten Tomatoes was one of his picks. Also, about 3 months after launch, Pixar had a movie called A Bug's Life. And when it came out, the day it came out, we had a huge spike in traffic, and we were trying to figure out where it was coming from. And when our guys looked it up, they realized a lot of it was coming from Pixar. And what we later found out was someone at Pixar, I guess, found our site, sent it around within the Pixar office, and they were all coming to our site and just hitting refresh over and over to see, as we added each review, what people were saying about the movie. And that's when we realized, like, you know, people are taking notice of the site, and specifically, the movie industry was noticing and using Rotten Tomatoes. So we decided to combine forces. Sen and Steven and I, we all joined together to become co-founders of Design Reactor and Rotten Tomatoes, and we all share an equal equity stake in both companies. I then went out and raised an angel round of funding of a little bit over 1 million US. And we passed Design Reactor off to another firm to take over and took an equity stake in that company. And since that company took over Design Reactor, they've still done some pretty cool things for the entertainment industry. They made the official website for A Beautiful Mind starring Russell Crowe. They did The Hulk, directed by Alan Lee. And Born Supremacy, starring Matt Damon. So now after we transitioned over to focus on Rotten Tomatoes, raised money, gave away our design firm, on March 10th, 2000, the internet stock bubble burst. We were trying to close our funding in January 2000. You know, we're still sorting out legal paperwork. We're still waiting for people to put money in. One investor actually backed out. Like, he just had too much of a hit to his net worth, felt very comfortable investing in anything else, especially like an internet site. So we barely made it. Had we tried to close our funding 2 months later, very likely we would not have raised any money, and there would be no Rotten Tomatoes today. So after the bubble burst, we realized we had to go into survival mode. We just had to do anything we could to save business. And one thing that really helped keep us alive the first year was we had 2 of our investors had a company called KillerApp, which was a price comparison engine, which sold to CNET. CNET also bought a company called MindSimon, which is another price comparison engine. So those investors put us in touch with CNET and MySimon. And then MySimon cut a deal with us where they bought all of our ad inventory at $5 CPM, which is $5 per 1,000 impressions for 1 year. And at first, that deal was pretty fair for everyone. But because of the bubble bursting, ad rates dropped like crazy, and it became a very, very bad deal for MySimon. And the whole time, we were just scared that any day they would go and cancel the deal. But luckily, they did not. And so they actually waited the whole year before they didn't choose to renew, obviously. But that kept us alive, and probably in their case, they had enough problems to deal with the whole bubble bursting that probably they just didn't notice. Another thing we had to do was we had to cut our costs. We were forced to bootstrap. We had no choice. So one thing we did was we had to go from the 20-something people you had saw before to 14 to 11, and finally down to 7. And this is pretty much like the core 7 people that started Rotten Tomatoes. And the reason why we stuck at 7 rather than cut further was we felt like if we wanted to run this as a real business, we couldn't do any more cuts. And so in addition to myself, Steven, and Sen, we had Susan Nakasora and Din No, who were our 2 editors. We had Paul Lee, who was our sales and marketing, and we had Lily Chi, who was our chief financial officer and kind of like a company mom. She actually had 2 sons that were like our age. We also subleased some space out. So we had 2 friends, 2 brothers, Lyle and Dennis Long, that had a company called Gamers.com. They had actually raised 17 million US. They were focused around gaming strategies, news, reviews. And they had a huge office, 130 people. But when the market crashed, they were burning over 1 million US per month. And then ad rates dropped, they weren't able to raise more money, and they had to fold their company. But luckily, from there, they were able to take some of their technology out, and they launched a new company. Lyle launched a new company called Lithium Technologies. At that time, they had maybe less than 10 people. So we had a lot of space because we had to cut back. So they just subleased extra space from us. And actually, since then, Lyle's like kicking ass. He's raised about 100 million US now. The company's worth about $500 million. And he has offices all around the world. Just recently opened one in Singapore. Another way we were able to cut costs was all 7 of us that remained, we took pay cuts of at least 30%. In the case of Paul and myself, we went to 0 salary. And the way I was able to do that was move out of my apartment, grab a sleeping bag, and just live at the office for a few months. So the old model, what companies would do before the bubble burst, they would raise a bunch of money, do a land grab, basically try to buy as many eyeballs as possible, get as much traffic to their site as possible to raise more money, and then try to IPO, do an initial public offering where their investors would see liquidity and could sell their shares. But after the bubble burst, the new reality was that this old model was dead. It didn't work anymore. When we first started Rotten Tomatoes, we identified over 100 competitors in the review, movie, entertainment space. And very quickly after the bubble burst, it became survival of the fittest. Those 100+ competitors, within like a year and a half, were down to like less than a dozen. So what kind of companies survived? 2 types. On the one side, you had small teams. There were sites like Liverpool News, created by Harry Knowles, which was a movie gossip and rumor site. You had sites like Dark Horizons, created by Garth Franklin, which was entertainment news and movie reviews. And on the other side of the spectrum, you had the big players, companies that owned and operated movie sites, but did not depend on those movie sites to stay in business. So for example, there's Movies.com, which was owned and operated by Disney. There's Yahoo Movies. And there's IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, which is pretty much the biggest movie site out there. And they were acquired by Amazon in 1998, so before the crash. So they didn't need to worry about money. So after things seemed like they were kind of getting better, getting a little bit more stable, 18 months after the bubble burst, we had 9/11. And obviously it was like extremely tragic. But one thing was it really affected a lot of media companies. And the reason why is because almost all the advertisers pulled back a ton of their advertising because who wants to go and see an ad like after this? So it really affected both new media and old media. So especially for internet companies, it was like a 1-2 punch. Like you get hit by the bubble burst, and just as you're getting on your feet, this comes and hits you. So for those first 2 years, it was really hard. So after all those 2 years, surviving those 2 years, we eventually started seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. We started seeing some growth. One way we exhibited that growth was we grew from 7 people to 10. So we added Evan Coet, who's based in LA, and he has a really great background. He actually, before he joined Rotten Tomatoes, he was at Disney, Moviephone, and iPhone. We have James Chen, who also went to UC Berkeley, majored in computer science, and we added him as an additional engineer. And we had Mark Moran, who was an additional editor. On the growth side, we focused on 3 primary areas: traffic, revenue, and brand. On the traffic side, most of our traffic came through SEO, which is search engine optimization, and word of mouth. About 70% of our traffic came directly from search engines. Our Alexa rank has always floated around 800. So Alexa rank is basically the ranking of the top sites in the world based on their traffic and reach. So it would spike, tends to spike in the summer when the big movies come out, and it's a little bit lower afterwards, but for the most part it's around 800. And to give you an idea of our traffic, in January 2006, that month we had 6.2 million uniques, according to ComScore. Another way we grew our traffic was through automation. By automating, we were able to have more content that search engines could lead to and more people could read. So one way we were able to automate was working with MRQE, the movie review query engine created by Stuart Clayman. So MRQE basically grabbed all the links from all the professional critics for every movie. So we worked with them and licensed this information from them rather than have our guys have to go out and manually find all these review links. So it saved us a lot of time. In addition to working with MRQE, we licensed data from Muse. So Muse provided us with generic movie data such as filmography, synopsis, runtime, etc. And by getting from them, this is kind of information that every movie site had. And so there's no point for us to go and do that, rather than using our editor instead to focus on things that were unique to us, such as the tomato meter rating. A third thing we did was we added critic submissions. So Rotten Tomatoes is basically a search engine for movie reviews. And we found that a lot of critics wanted to join and become part of the tomato meter. And so what we did is we created a pretty strict criteria on consider a professional reviewer. And then we asked that they use the critic submission tool. So with the tool, they could go in, they could submit the link to the review, they could add their own quote, and let us know if it's fresh or rotten. And so this not only saved our guys' time, but it actually made things more accurate, because we have a movie that's like, a critic gives a movie like 2.5 stars out of 4. It's like hard sometimes to figure out whether they're recommending it or not recommending it. So by doing all this automation, we were able to cut our editors from 10 people down to 2, Susan and Min. And those 2 were able to cover a lot more movies than we were able to do with 10 people manually. Another way we grew traffic was we launched a new look that's a little bit cleaner, but kept kind of the same color scheme. We launched new features, including movie forums. And at the time we were running Rotten Tomatoes, our movie forums were, I think, the most trafficked movie forums out there. We had a weekly newsletter that highlighted, upcoming movies and DVDs. And we had the Vine. The Vine was our attempt at social networking. So the idea was that if everyone's a tomato, the Vine is like what connects you all. And the way it worked was you could go out, you could add your friends, and then you could write your own movie reviews. And so in addition to the critics' tomato meter rating, we had a user rating, then we had your friends rating. We felt that each of those would give different information about a movie to help you better decide if you wanted to see a movie or not. And we launched into the games category, and to kind of show that we could take our model and go into more categories. And you guys have probably never seen the games category because it does not exist right now. And I'll go into that a little bit later. On the revenue side, all the things that we did to kind of bootstrap the company allowed us to get to break even. And when we got to break even, what's good about that is, at that point, you can raise funding on your own terms, and you can run indefinitely. You won't go out of business because you're not losing money. We had revenue from 3 sources. 50% came from advertising, 30% from affiliate deals, and 20% from licensing. On the advertising side, most of it came from banner and rich media ads. We also had sponsorships for the newsletter, and we had some special sauce campaigns. So one example was the New York Times. The New York Times came to us and they realized, like, hey, we're driving a lot of traffic to their movie reviewer. And they're like, how can we work with you to get more traffic to our movie reviewer? So actually, Evan was very creative, and he came up with featured sponsor. And the idea there was they could pay us to highlight their critic more prominently, but then that critic did not actually, they affected the tomato meter the same as before. But then by doing this, we were able to get revenue from New York Times. They were able to get more traffic. We did not affect the tomato meter rating, and it was not like standard added inventory. It was new inventory. We also worked on affiliate deals. So one great partner for us was All Posters. They provided us with movie poster data, image data, as well as celebrity photos. And they gave us this data for free because they wanted us to help sell stuff with them. So if people clicked over and they ended up buying any of the All Posters products, we actually got 55% of all the sales. And we did not have, they handled the shipping, distribution, inventory, payment. And normally I think they do like 30%, but we were like, they were our neighbors in every mill. We worked very closely with them, but they're a great partner for us. We also worked with Price Driver. They were another price comparison engine. They provided us with price comparison data for DVDs and movie soundtracks. And if people clicked over to them, it didn't even matter if they bought anything. If they clicked, I think we got 10 to 15 cents per click. We also worked with movietickets.com. They provide us with movie showtime and theater location data that we could use on our site. And if people bought a movie ticket, we would get something like, I think, 25 cents to 40 cents per ticket sold. And we worked with Sideshow Toy, which had movie collectibles and memorabilia. On the licensing side, we worked with Comcast, Netflix, Microsoft. So in their case, they were able to license data like the tomato meter rating, links to reviews, quotes. And what was good for them is, rather than trying to do this all themselves, they could just license it from us because this was not core to their business. But then for us, it worked out really well because these were typically 1 or 2 year deals. They pay a fixed fee every month, so it was very stable revenue for us. Whereas with advertising, for instance, for us, it would spike very heavily in the summer and spike in the winter for Oscars. For affiliate deals, it would spike heavily around Christmas. We also grew our brand awareness through media partnerships. One way we did that was through traditional media. We worked with Daily Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, both trade magazines out in Hollywood, to get our tomato meter rating into their magazines. And this was a content for distribution deal, so they did not pay us. But we felt it was important from a brand growth perspective. We also worked with new media, such as Ask.com and Google Desktop. We also created the Certified Fresh tier, where if a movie was 75% or higher, it was considered certified fresh. And that meant that 3 out of every 4 critics at least recommended seeing that movie. This is something that Evan actually came up with. The first movie that we had that actually was certified fresh was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, starring Jim Carrey. And as you can see in the poster, they actually included our logo. And what was really cool about this was, sometimes we have ad campaigns where they go and buy a big ad campaign on Rotten Tomatoes, their movie comes out and it's rotten, and they would be incredibly unhappy, and they would try to actually get us to change ratings and whatever. We're like, we cannot do that. But then on the flip side, if the movie was certified fresh, that was something that they really wanted to let everyone know. So in the cases where sometimes a movie came out certified fresh, sometimes those studios would actually go and buy additional campaigns to try to spread that word about that the movie was good. We also created the Golden Tomato. And the Golden Tomato is essentially an annual award for the best, highest rated movies in a number of different categories and genres. So in 2003, Finding Nemo actually won the award. It had a 98% fresh rating. And this is a photo of Lee and Andrew, the co-directors of the movie, with a box of fresh tomatoes from Rotten Tomatoes. Here's a shot of Lee and Andrew with Graham, the producer, along with Paul, Sen, and Stephen. And what was really cool was they had a huge trophy case. In the center of the trophy case, they had the Oscars. And in front of the Oscars, they had our Dinky Little Award. And yeah, it looks like crap, but actually, when you think about it, it's harder to get our award than it is to get an Oscar. The following year, another Pixar movie won the Golden Tomato Award. It was a movie called Incredibles, directed by Brad Bird. And here he is, and here's another shot of him with Sen at the Pixar offices. And for those of you that might not know, he actually recently directed a movie that did pretty well on Rotten Tomatoes called Mission Impossible, starring Tom Cruise, which had a 94% fresh rating. And then another way we grew brand awareness was through word of mouth. And this is probably the best example of word of mouth ever for us. Daily Show, where Jon Stewart is interviewing Mark Ruffalo, and Mark Ruffalo recently starred in the Hulk as the Hulk in the Avengers. So here's the clip.
Now this movie is actually getting great reviews. It's on. You ever go on Rotten Tomatoes?
No.
Rotten Tomatoes is like it's like a website that reviews movies before they. I guess before they come out. Or
Did we get any?
You got very good reviews. You got full tomatoes, which is good.
Like not rotten ones.
No, if you get a tomato, that means that a certain percentage of people say it's good. I think it's over like 70% say it's good. And if not, you get, I'm not even sure why they do this, an asterisk, which makes no sense. So if your movie is bad, there's an asterisk next to it. Delicious.
And we got
A delicious tomato. So congratulations. Very exciting. Eternal Sunshine also got a tomato.
It did.
Yeah.
That's it's good.
Yeah, it's all asterisk.
So when this came out, actually, I was rooming with Mark Moran, one of our editors, and he watches the Daily Show pretty regularly. I don't normally watch it. I just happened to be out microwaving some food, and I was standing in the living room as he was watching, and then suddenly Jon Stewart starts talking about Rotten Tomatoes. We had no idea he was going to do that, and Mark and I were just like, oh my god, like just freaking out. We're like grabbing our cell phones, like trying to tell everyone, like, switch to the Daily Show, and it was pretty cool. We sent them a box of fresh tomatoes later. So after all of this, we eventually sold the company. We had some early offers. One was from iFilm, which is basically like almost like YouTube before YouTube. And another company called Universe, which is better known for creating MySpace. But these offers were actually, pennies on the dollar. And at the time we were already break even, and we felt like there's no point in taking an offer where our investors are going to lose money. And we felt like we wanted to hold on until we could at least make our investors some money. So we said no. Later on, we got a couple other offers. IGN Entertainment, which is a big gaming site. Hollywood.com, CNET, and Google. And we ended up selling to IGN Entertainment, and here's why. Hollywood.com was not willing to match IGN's offer. CNET, which runs GameSpot, which is a direct competitor to IGN, was willing to match, but CNET has more VPs than IGN had people. So we're just like, it doesn't make sense to sell them because we're just going to get lost in the shuffle. Google, we would have loved to have sold to them, but then we originally tried to reach out to them to like a low-level manager guy who did not write back. And then 3 weeks before we were about to close the deal with IGN, someone higher level called us and said, hey, I heard you're shopping around and want to talk. And we would have loved to talk to them, but two problems. Number one, we had already signed a no-shop agreement, so we weren't allowed to shop around and talk to other people for a period of time. And number two, we had already spent about $300,000 in legal fees, negotiating and closing the deal with IGN. So for us to have tried to sell to Google, we have to do one of two things. One, we would either have to try to secretly talk to them, which would have been really in bad faith to do. Or number two, we would have had to eat the legal fees, wait 6 months for the no-shop to expire, and then try to talk to them, and then see if they were actually serious for that. And we just felt like it was too risky and we didn't decide not to do it. And also, when IGN bought us, since they're a gaming site, they felt like there was no reason for us to be in the gaming category, so they shut that part down. So what did we sell? Rotten Tomatoes is actually my third company. I've been doing different startups for about 9 years up to that point, and I wanted to try something new. Also, being in ABC, being born and growing up in the States, I wanted to see what Asia was like, specifically China and Hong Kong. Also, people are growing up. When people were first starting, they were like early 20s. By then, they were late 20s or even 30 or higher. And people getting married, having kids, buying their first house, buying cars. And we felt like if we sell, people will be able to afford these things, and then they can go get a job somewhere, or maybe some people can start something new. Yeah, some of you guys might recognize the dude on the left. So after the sale. So we sold to IGN back in June 2004. We sold for $10 million US. IGN sold to News Corp in September 2005. They had spent about $100 million going private, buying Rotten Tomatoes, buying AskMen, GameSpy, and a couple other sites. So that whole group of sites sold for $650 million. News Corp later traded us over to Flixster in January 2010 for equity. And then Flixster / Rotten Tomatoes sold about a year ago to Warner Brothers Online for somewhere around 60 to 90 million. timeline to kind of show you how the site has changed over the years. So this is the original version from 98 to 2000. 2001 we had a new version come out. And in 2002, if you look on the top, we added some new features. 2003, we added gaming on the bottom left. And then 2004, IGN bought us, and it looked mostly the same. 2005, they had their version, which was kind of similar layout, less branding on the top, a little bit darker overall, but similar color scheme. 2006, again, pretty similar, News Corp now owns us. 2007, News Corp did a really big deal with Google. Google did a $1 billion deal with the Fox internet media sites so that it would power the search for all the Fox sites, including Rotten Tomatoes and MySpace. So you can see the Google bar there. 2008, News Corp has a new version, has some of the same kind of colors, but there's a lot more blue, and they have this like grass and sky motif, which I'm not like totally sure how it works to Rotten Tomatoes, but whatever. And then 2009, these headers turned green, otherwise kind of similar. 2010, Flix owns us. Upper right, you'll see they integrated the Facebook login. And then 2011, Flixster's version. So this is kind of like the Rotten Tomato colors, but then everything else is kind of Facebooky blue and white. And then for some reason they went with like a really strong cloud motif. And I don't know, I don't see tomatoes in the cloud, but whatever. And then 2012 it kind of looks the same. And for me personally, I prefer our older versions because I felt like the yellow, the green, orange, brown color had more personality. And this is a little bit bland in my opinion, but you know, whatever. So on the brand side, Rotten Tomatoes has continued to grow. From March 2009 through September 2010, there was actually a Rotten Tomatoes show on Current TV. Current TV is like this all-in TV network co-founded by former Vice President Al Gore. And so here's a clip of the intro to a Rotten Tomatoes show. And if you pay close attention, you'll see shout-outs to different movies.
On this special edition of the Rotten Tomatoes show, we take a look at the best of sin and vice in the movies.
The top 5 drugs, the best parties, the worst kisses, they're all here.
So sit back, relax, and get ready to get dirty. Hey everybody, I'm Brett Ehrlich.
And I'm Ellen Fox, and welcome to the Rotten Tomatoes show.
We also were featured in some books, or mentioned in some books. One was a book about vampires called Twilight. And they said basically, Rotten Tomatoes gave it a better review. Kind of cool. We also were integrated into iTunes and Apple TV. And here's Steve Jobs talking a little bit about that.
And my own computer, I get in there and listen to all my music or any other content I have on the computer. So let me go into top movies right here. Here's Iron Man right here. I can watch a free preview course. I can see all the films that other people rented that rented Iron Man 2. And I can just scroll down here if I want to. And again, I can, Robert Downey Jr., I can see what other films he was in. These are all the other films of Gwyneth Paltrow. I can look at customer reviews, and I can look at the Rotten Tomato reviews. It's pretty nice.
So yeah, that was pretty nice. We were also mentioned in the Steve Jobs biography in reference to Toy Story when he was at Pixar. Toy Story was actually at 100% fresh rating. And before you're probably wondering like, what the heck? Every Pixar movie is like does super well. But part of the reason is they're family friendly. So for the most part, critics tend to be more favorable to that. Also, when you think about it, back in 1995, a movie like Toy Story was so far ahead of its time. Like anyone who saw it is probably going to recommend that other people see it. Hence the 100% rating. But not all Pixar movies, well, all but one Pixar movie is fresh. What are these drawn? Does anyone have any idea? Yeah. Cars 2 was rotten, 38%. So Rotten Tomatoes, we always refer to ourselves as a family. You know, the Design Reactor, Rotten Tomatoes group, everyone was pretty much in school together, worked together for many years. And so anytime I go back to the Bay Area, I usually go and meet up with them. So this is a shot we had about 2 years ago, do a group lunch or group dinner. As you can see, the family has grown a bit. And actually, some of us are really family. So Susan Nakasura, one of our editors, she actually married my younger brother. So she's now my sister-in-law. It's kind of weird. And then Vin, who was another editor, him and Sen have been lifelong friends. Vin's cousin married Sen, so now they're cousin-in-laws. So they're actually connected. We've also named a bunch of baby tomatoes. So what are we doing now? Some of us are doing a new project. Myself and Steven have been in Hong Kong working on a site called Web Not Dead, which is like online social network for artists to connect to their fans. Quick plug, we have a Halloween party on Saturday at Zuma. It should be fun. If you're interested in going, you can buy tickets on Web Not Dead. We're also working on a live.cn, which is kind of a marketplace where artists and brands can connect to get artists more work. Sen and Ben are working on a new site called Movies with Butter, and focuses around movie news and headlines. As for the rest of the team, they're all over the place: Blizzard, ILM, Apple, Fox Sports, Pixar. A lot, but still within the entertainment industry. So some final thoughts. Why we did it. We did it before it was cool. When we were doing stuff, you know, this is before the Social Network movie came out, before everyone wants to be the next Mark Zuckerberg and make $1 billion. We didn't do it for money, we did it for friendship. And the idea was, you know, people in the US, if you graduate from high school, you just go all over the US for college. When you graduate from college, you go all over the place for work. And typically, your work friends are not as good as your college friends. Your college friends are not always as good as your high school friends. And I thought, why does it have to be like that? So instead, let's work together, let's all stick together. But one potential drawback of that is we kind of lacked vision. We weren't doing it necessarily for money or to try to make a huge site. We just wanted to do something that we were proud of and we thought was pretty cool. And because of that, we didn't necessarily try to make it as big as possible. We actually kind of thought, you know, maybe this is as far as Rotten Tomatoes is going to go. Another thing I realized was timing matters. So as I mentioned before, if we raise later, we're probably no Rotten Tomatoes. If we raised earlier, we would have been running into a whole pile of companies that have raised tons of money. And also, we might have had the same problems that gamers had, where maybe we raised a lot of money, we're spending too aggressively, and run into the same issues that they had. So it's hard to say if we would have done better or worse having raised earlier. So in addition to knowing that timing matters, luck matters as well. And if you have a company and you're doing really well, you're super successful, you can take a lot of credit, but don't take all the credit. Realize that timing and luck play a big factor in that. And similarly, if you're running a company and it's failing, it's not doing well, again, it's not necessarily completely your fault. Timing and luck, again, plays a huge role in that. Finally, hindsight is 20/20. Some things that maybe you could have done differently. First, the timing of the sale. Like, you can never really time when you're going to sell a company, but when we sold, Google had not gone public. And when they went public, they were the rising tide that floats all boats. Like, all internet valuations went up. And so if we just waited, you know, 2 or 3 years, we probably would have gotten a better offer. Another thing was Google. You know, again, had we actually sold to them, this is before they went public. If we just took the same amount of money in stock instead of cash, like, yeah. And then lastly, you know, maybe if we stuck with it, there might have been a couple ways we could have taken it to make it bigger. One way is, maybe we could have been Flixster. You know, Rotten Tomatoes was like a web 1.5 company. We weren't exactly web 1.0, but we were definitely not 2.0. Flixster was like Rotten Tomatoes 2.0. They were extremely heavy on mobile and Facebook ads. And so they actually started later than us, were really aggressive on 2.0, doing the viral loop and all kinds of other ways to gain users. And then they ended up buying us. But maybe if we stuck with it and were more aggressive in going to Web 2.0, we could have been that. Another way is, how do we go and expand into more categories? So we actually went into games. We were very close to going to music as well. And we looked briefly at books and restaurants. And maybe it wouldn't make that much sense for a restaurant rating site to be called Rotten Tomatoes, but maybe you could have launched it as like a separate brand, who knows. And clearly some categories like restaurants are actually way more valuable than movie reviews as a category. And then finally, another direction we could have gone was online streaming video. So companies like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. And I think Rotten Tomatoes actually could have been pretty good at that had we been able to be more forward-thinking, because people came to our site to figure out what movie they wanted to see or what DVD they wanted to rent. And if they could actually, at that moment, go and watch the movie, like, I think it's logical that we could have been a good place for online streaming video. And with that said, that's it. Thank you all for coming out. And does anyone have any questions? We're about maybe 20 minutes for Q&A.
How do you take what you learned back then and apply it
I think some of the principles will apply anywhere. Things like trying to keep your costs down, bootstrapping, some of the strategies in terms of like SEO and stuff. Some things that we learned. The market's a little bit different now. It's very focused on mobile and viral, and some things that we had not been as involved with Rotten Tomatoes. But definitely some of the basic learning, some of the things I mentioned today, definitely still apply. Anyone else?
Patrick, was there a way for you to, so you mentioned, I think your IGN gave you a no-shop clause when they were looking at you. Looking back, I mean, how would you? Was there a way you could fight it, or?
Well, we were very inexperienced. Maybe we could have gotten like a company to represent us for the sale. That maybe could have gone out and tried to be more aggressive. We thought, well, we're selling for a relatively little amount, so we didn't think it was worth it. But probably a company that's more experienced would probably never have let us do that. They were originally offering around 9 million. They're like, well, maybe 10, but you need to sign this no shop. And we're like, okay. So, yeah, maybe if we were more experienced, but this is the first time I ever dealt with anything like that. Looking back, yeah, we definitely could have handled it better.
So does that imply that you didn't have VC money that was guiding you in some way? Because the money you had was from inexperienced people like yourself?
Pretty much, almost all of it was from angels. It was people we worked with as our design firm, and then they may have sold their company. Most of them were typical, like other entrepreneurs, and so they put money in to support us. But I think for a lot of them, what happened was when the bubble burst, pretty much any internet investment they had went to zero. So when there was an offer to finally sell and actually make a return on their initial investment with us, they were just like sell, sell, sell. Like almost all of them, like one person was like, oh no, I don't think you should sell, and actually they were probably right.
So do you involve heavily after the sale? Is there like a long transition?
So I actually left almost right afterwards because I came out to China. But then Steven stuck around for about 2 years, and a number of other people stuck around for about 2 to 3 more years. And I think around the time when we were at News Corp, pretty much everyone left. I think they put someone in charge that didn't know much about movies or anything. I think what one of the guys told me was, they were like, I don't know about the name Rotten Tomatoes. Maybe it's kind of negative. Maybe we should change it. They'd be like, that's like the brand. You can't just change it after like 8 years or whatever. So yeah, I think some guys kind of got frustrated. We were just like, we're out. But now I met some of the Fixer people, but I'm not like super close to them.
But is it usually a requirement that that they make you stay for a bit after you sell?
Yeah, so they made like Steven said and much about it. Like I was negotiating for me to leave early, and then I think our CFO, they did not keep out of it because typically when they acquire, they just get rid of the finance people.
What are some of the biggest challenges you see here in Asia for like startups and entrepreneurs?
Good question. So if you look at Asia, the biggest challenge I think is you look at the markets. Right? There are some countries that can support huge internet business on their own. Countries like China, Japan, I think India, potentially Korea. They're large enough population and money to support these large businesses. But then you look at countries in Southeast Asia, like Hong Kong or Singapore, and their population is really small. I mean, they're wealthy, but it's very small. So it becomes difficult to make a huge, I don't know if you can make $1 billion internet business just focusing on like the Hong Kong market, for instance. And so you almost have to go out and try to reach into China, or reach internationally, or reach into Southeast Asia. But then if you're in Hong Kong, for instance, and you're trying to reach into China, you're probably maybe better off just being in China. But then if you're not local Chinese, it's like very difficult. If you're trying to do international, it's possible, but maybe you're better off leaving the States. And if you're trying to do Southeast Asia, the problem with Southeast Asia is, as a whole, yeah, it's a pretty big market. There's like a million different languages, and the culture is totally different, and are you going to like have, you know, like sales teams in every place? And like, I feel like the ad sales and some of these other things are not as developed as versus, you know, being in the States and just worrying about one language. So yeah, there are definitely some challenges. Anyone else? Yeah, so we've actually raised about $500,000 US. And then one of our investors is actually coming on board to take over my position as the CEO. And him and Steven and Rafi and another person are going to be focusing in Hong Kong to try to grow out the Alive.ca marketplace.
But the Alive, but the Alive for that business, is that focusing on Hong Kong only, or is that regional? Is that why you're based in Hong Kong?
Right now we're based here just because that's where people are, but it's kind of focusing on Greater China. Yeah, and potentially down the road we'll probably move the team possibly to China.
Any big lessons from living in China?
Well, I guess a couple things. I mean, just what I like about each place. Things I like about Hong Kong, I like the transportation system. I like the security. I actually feel very safe here. When I go back to the States, I'm like, man, I hope they don't have guns. Like, you know, it's pretty scary. Like, people are now like scared to go to movie theaters to watch Batman, right? But then, you know, certain things here, like the pollution is not that great. The startup scene, there is a group here, and there's a lot of different organizations that are trying to push the startup scene. But again, it's pretty difficult. The analogy I would make is, if you're an actor, you probably should be in Hollywood. If you're an internet startup, for the most part, you probably should be in the Bay Area. It's just because Bay Area has had so much success, so many huge companies that have grown there. The way you look at it is, these big companies like a Google or an Apple, when they grow up, they grow up into these giant companies, and suddenly they have like 1,000+ millionaires. These millionaires are the ones who are going to be starting up new companies and angel investing into new startups. So if you look at those companies as a big tree, all these guys have real seeds that drop. A bunch of those will grow into new trees, which has happened from like HP, Apple, you know, Google, Facebook. It just keeps happening and happening. But they're like a giant forest now. Whereas almost everywhere else you look, it's just a bunch of saplings. Like maybe China probably has like 4 trees. You know, Baidu, Tencent, Sina, and Alibaba. And then those trees are like the most aggressive trees ever. Like you try to grow a little sapling and the tree comes over and just chops it down. So it's difficult. So I think for places like Hong Kong or Singapore, it's like somehow if you can get your own Facebook or your own like $1 billion company, you'll see, you know, the market, the talent come in. You'll have these angel investors who will be putting into other startups. And as a culture, like when you look at places like Hong Kong, if you're a good engineer, so a lot of times you like go work at a bank or something. You don't necessarily want to go into a startup. Even if you want to go into a startup, your family's probably like, no, you're not going to a startup. Because a lot of these people, they don't know or care about stock options. And because there hasn't been a Facebook, like what does stock options even mean? Because these companies are not IPOing and stuff to make people suddenly really rich. So until that happens, if that happens, it will hopefully change the whole mindset of the whole culture. And there needs to be a couple of these to really change the thinking. And if you look in the States, even in the States, people are more accepting, but really the Bay Area, it's like everyone is trying to be in a startup, work at a startup, you know, put money into startups. Kind of like if you go to Hollywood, like everyone you meet, like the waiter is like trying to be an actor. So same kind of thing.
How much capital do you think you need if you actually want to launch like a website like Rotten Tomatoes? Like to have an efficient, up and running website, you know, obviously the different kind of levels, but to have a functional, you know, well-branded, decent eyeballs. I mean, do you have like an estimate based on your experience?
I think it depends a lot on your team. You know, if you assume that the core founding team is working for like next to no salary in the beginning, then obviously the cost would be much lower. But then in that case, you really need to have 50% or more of your team needs to be like really good engineers. So in our case, we were really lucky we had Stephen. Because otherwise, if you don't have that, you're going to have to run around and try to hire a good engineer. And if you have to hire someone, immediately your cost goes way up. And then sometimes you see people who are like, oh, I'm going to contract it out, and that's like the worst idea ever, because if you have a website that you launch, you're going to have to constantly iterate and improve on it all the time, and you can't just keep going back to the contractor and be like, oh, can you make mistakes, can you make mistakes, and they're just going to keep charging you. As far as how much it costs, assuming you had a team of at least one really good engineer, and then maybe someone else that's like sales or biz dev or design, you could probably get a site that's similar for $250,000 maybe, but then to get the traffic, it's not that easy these days to go and get the SEO, to get individual, like Rotten Tomatoes, the traffic is basically because you look for any actor, director, or movie, and we're very likely on the first page of results. And that took a long time to get to that point. But if you're starting a new site and trying to do that, it's not that easy to get out there because you've got like Wikipedia, IMDb, and all these ones that have been around and are highly linked. So you can make one that's like licensing the data, has the same kind of functionality, but the traffic is a whole other challenge, and getting the brand awareness would be a whole other challenge.
Given your experience in China and in Hong Kong, if you were to give a piece of advice to the Hong Kong entrepreneur.
Well, what I've seen here, I think, is I feel like most of the startups I've encountered are usually expats or returnees. Like they went to go and study somewhere else and then came back. Because I feel like a lot of like the really local people, they tend to be more conservative. They won't do their own startup. And I think if you're an expat, I would maybe say go home and do it where you came from. Like where you're strongest, where you have the most contacts. But otherwise, if you're in Hong Kong, I think about things that are your strengths out here. So maybe taking advantage of like Chinese manufacturing, through Hong Kong, or maybe selling internationally, as an example. Something that leverages the strength of Hong Kong and its proximity to China. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.